Bonjour. Alors, on se revoit pour une autre partie de l'émission qu'on avait commencé la semaine dernière, qui était sur des aspects touristiques, mais qui, évidemment, deviennent aussi des aspects historiques et culturels. Donc, bienvenue à cette émission. Les Kanien'keháka hôtes sur leur territoire et voisins à notre quotidien. Aujourd'hui, on reprend avec notre invité de la semaine dernière, qui est Harley de la Ronde. There we go. Et puis, on va reprendre là où on était. On allait parler justement du centre culturel. Alors, comme à l'habitude, on va transitionner vers l'anglais parce que c'est la langue de choix. Et puis, vous allez avoir la chance d'avoir le sous-titrage sur YouTube lorsque ça sera disponible. Donc, thank you for being available once again, Harley. I'm very, very happy that we could pursue what we had started last week. And we were going to talk about the Cultural Center, but then we ran short in time and we figured, you know what, it's worth talking about. So, and very, very happy that they've permitted us to film indoors inside the establishment that's still not quite finished, but coming along quite well. So this must be quite an event for you and for the community to have this cultural center.
Oh, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I want to in Alagoa, and it's very exciting. It's something that many people in the community have been looking forward to. I think even before they actually started to to organize and to fundraise. I don't know the exact how long they've been doing or formally attempting to build this facility, because I know in the past the cultural centers that the locations have been really very small and not with a lot of the bells and whistles, if you would, of many facilities of the type. But it's really exciting. It's from my own personal standpoint, being a person who loves our history, loves our stories, loves our culture, and tries my best to at least to promote that in my own way. I think this is a fantastic opportunity and a fantastic way for. It's really two-pronged in a way, kind of. And I think number one, it's for our own community. Number one, it's a way to express our pride in our people, our community, our culture. It's also a way for us to promote it within the community, because we have the facilities here that allow us to do a variety of different things and make them a lot more alive, vibrant. Some of the things that that are in here, talking about language programs, their location, talking about theater, talking about a museum. We're talking about and other places where there's basically rooms and facilities where people can practice and teach all of the many different cultural practices, cultural knowledge. And it's just super exciting, and for me anyway.
So It's almost done. We're probably going to take some shots of the building, still becoming, but there are already nice parts of it that are finished and almost done. But you can sort of imagine what's coming. Like the theater is really beautiful. The museum part is coming along quite well. I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, for sure. I know the people, first of all, I really want to talk about the many of the individuals who it's been a dream of theirs for this, and all the work that was done. This, as most people know about building a facility like this, it just doesn't happen overnight. It's a long process. There's a lot of meeting. There's a lot of promoting the idea, and also going out there and acquiring the resources that are needed. So that in itself, there's a lot of days that most people see this building, they come here, oh, wow, but they don't know all the back work that must have gone to it. And I don't, but in speaking to people, some of my friends and people involved in it, it's been a dream for them especially. So I'm really happy for the whole community, but also for them. And again, it gives us an opportunity for so much. I think the museum part is, for me, is the thing I'm looking for. I mean, the theater is fantastic. You'll I guess like you said, you'll see some of it, and we're pretty close to being complete. And from what it's just been always delays that are going on, and they want to have it completely ready. And there's this and there's that. Those things should almost be a given in a lot of these. So, but the theater, the museum is something. When I would give tours, I'm normally a tour guide in the old museum. We're talking about one room, one small little room where you're trying to cram everything. And then my understanding is that so much. I go and I talk to people and show them about a small area and say, there's so much more we could look at. There's so much more that we could see. And also when you bring and you look and there's stories behind all of this, that having a little script next to it doesn't always tell everything. Right. The scripts or whatever, the explanations are there, but there's so much more that can come alive, whether it's asking questions or having someone around who can maybe add to it, the storytelling that goes with the background and everything. So for me, that part about our own community, going back to what I was saying originally, it's an opportunity for us to keep that alive, keep those stories, keep that knowledge, keep that pride, and just keep it alive. But even more than keeping it alive, really promoting it, really making the entire community more knowledgeable. Because let's face it, not everyone in this modern times that's not necessarily something that all of us have had access to. So, the stories and the history and so on. Even many of us, like myself, years ago, we went outside and I can talk about education a little later, but we didn't have that many of that. You had to dig for it even within the community. And or be lucky enough to have someone that you were, that you had access to, who had this information. But now it's a lot more readily available, and it's a place where community can come, community can share stories, community can interact and be proud, and learn from the museum about history, parts that they didn't know, little bits and pieces.
That's right. We're far away from Chief Poking Fire.
Oh,
I remember when I was a kid coming to the log, and my parents would drive by, and then I would say, I want to stop. But there were worlds apart here.
100%. And really, this is opportunity for us to tell our story the way we know what it is. And that's the second part, like you were saying, from the Chief Poking Fire time. Not that there's any. It's just the reality. It was what it was. It served the purpose for the time. But I think most people recognize that there was a lot more and more. We wanted to be a little bit more accurate, I guess, in actually what our own people know about our culture and our traditions and our dances and we can share that. That's the second part, sharing it. And I think that it's an important thing, again, going back as a tour guide, but as a community member, to understand that it's a place where people from passing by, people from neighboring communities, people from overseas are going to be able to say, hey, there's a place we want to go where we can, it's an exciting place. It's a place that I can learn about the real story about the people of Kahnawake, the Kahnawake Ronu, and the Kanien'keháka. And so it's just really exciting. It's twofold, as I said, for our own people, something, a sense of pride, and continuing that, but also for other people to come in and to learn about us and to learn about our story and build those better relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, I think. And but in talking about, I jump ahead. You know, some of the things that have been I've been following. I wasn't on the committee, but I wasn't involved in any of that. But you know, hearing about all of the work, as I was saying earlier, that went into this, the hard extra time that people put into it, and the dream, and the sometimes late nights and so on, and meetings and so on. That's I guess it was last fall. We had we had a radiothon in the community. Now the way I understand it, was my memory is that the majority of a large chunk of the fundraising had been done, but there was still extra. And the community had K103, our local station, was there to basically host this radiothon 2 days and on a weekend. And had a schedule, and they went to the community, brought different people in, telling the stories about the old, a variety of different slants and angles, and just entertaining, but also asking the community, you know, we need your assistance. Yeah. And the community came through. I think their goal for that weekend was, if I'm not mistaken, was $200,000 in the community. Well, guess what? They reached over $660,000.
Wow. We're talking about 9,000 people here.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
600, and for me, that says a lot, because what it said to me was the community was bought in. Yeah. The community wanted this. That this is something that we could, as I said, a sense of pride, sense of making it, I'm part of this. And so therefore it's for the future, it's for our children, it's for, and their children, something that will, well, not only be here, but it'll also grow in many different ways. So I think the community buy-in was so exciting for me.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important infrastructure in the sense that it's not only an anchor for the community, but it's also a beacon. Yeah. Because it calls upon those who are from Kanien'keháka, or who have indigenous attachment, and also a beacon for those who are not, that are curious, that want to learn.
Of course.
So it's really I think it's splendid.
Yeah, it is. In the theater, for example, our theater program has had, some ups and downs in terms of especially facilities, and done their best. They're fantastic. I've gone to a number of the events, the plays and the shows for a number of years. And this, they're just, I think they're going to be having in a couple of months, actually having a show. So they're totally excited, because also that promotes the talent we have in the community. That promotes, we've already have a number of different people from the community that have gone into the different performing arts and media and so on. Right. And this gives them another opportunity and more motivation to take a shot at that, to see if they've got that drive and that talent and that perseverance, So that's another area that's exciting. I know that, but going back to the museum, you may have talked to some people who know a bit about the background, but it's really going to be exciting, as we'll see, was when you enter the museum, there is basically, you'll follow basically a walkway, a slight grade, where you go around. It's a spiral, and you go about, and as you go along the spiral, there are different, I don't know what to call them exactly, display cases or whatnot. I'm probably using the wrong term, but in those, as you go, I believe there's close to 30 of them. They'll be telling the story about our people, about the Kanien'keháka and Kahnawake, and the Kanawake. So that will tell our story. So, and people can go along, and that for one part is exciting to a guy who was a teacher of social studies and taught our as much as I could, our history and some of our culture. So that's really exciting for me. It's just and the other thing about some of the important or really interesting aspects is there's going to be at the very bottom part of a longhouse or a section of the longhouse in there, and so when people who know, that would be the traditional early past years house that our extended families would live in. And there will be one in there, and people will be able to observe it, possibly go in. I'm not sure about all the details, but they'll have that, and you'll get a real good sense of what life would have been living in that. And that's going to be there. And then as you go up also to the top, when you get to the top, there's going to be, I guess, the sense of part of our creation story is the big sky woman, where woman falls, and part of the story is she falling from a sky world, and she falls and she lands eventually on the back, put on the back of the turtle, and you'll be able to get a sense of it. The floor is a turtle's back, that's great. And so there'll be. I'm not sure how they're going to play it out, but there's, from what I understand, it's going to be quite interesting and quite spectacular even, and I'm hoping that it'll really be something that, again, it'll be exciting to see anyway, and so I'm looking forward to it very much. And the other facilities to keep other, I guess, items that we can show and present that are important to the community. So there's so many different things. There's so many like shows on ironwork, for example, that I talked to you previously about the history of that. There could be things about that. There could be things about whatever aspect of our history or our culture. There'll be space for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we saw downstairs. There's also a studio, sound studio.
Yeah.
Recording studio for television. So that the television shows that the language shows that are being produced.
Yeah. And again, that's one of the projects. One of the I guess I don't know if it's projects, but one of the programs of the cultural center, Kanien'keháka Cultural Center, and for people who don't know, it's puppet show. Yeah. With basically two main characters, the Kanien'keháka, and again on YouTube, and they're puppets, and they have varieties for the children, and it's all in the language, and then they have different characters that come in and new characters that they have, and it's just part of the whole. But the facility that I've been shown what they have available to them compared to the facility they had, the space they had, is like it's night and day. Yeah. So they're excited. I know about that. They're excited about moving into that and having so much more opportunity to.
And the theater group also.
The theater group has the theater itself is. I think there's close to 200 seats, and there's a balcony or mezzanine or whatever, and they have all the bells and whistles to put on some really interesting, incredible shows. So that is another aspect of. But they also have their own areas. In the past, they would be probably, from my understanding, things piled on top of each other. They have no space. Yeah. Now they can actually do all aspects, a lot more easier to do all aspects of the production of these shows and storage, and even areas where if the theater's being used, they can actually rehearse without going into the theater. So there's so many possibilities still of the program. Another program that's housed in here is the Radiwananirats program, the adult language immersion program, which has been going on for like 20 years.
When we were
they've moved over from the cultural center, and they've got their their classroom space there. I think, and again, they've got a lot of flexibility, you know, in what's available to them. So that just also promotes that, and that, because that's a big part of what this is too. Is the language is crucial to our culture, and to preserving that is so important. Yeah. So that's what's available also. So we've
it covers events, pretty much everything.
Yeah,
but. Speaking about education, we're going to move from the cultural center. We're going to go towards education, because I know you mentioned it a couple of times, but we're going to go into it more deeply. Mm-hmm. You have a past that's directly related to teaching and the education system here in Kahnawake. We're right next to the survival school, which you were, I believe, managing at a certain point and teaching in.
Yeah.
So maybe you can talk to us about your passage there and the importance of education.
Sure. And then this place is part of the education. It's got no doubt it's going to be tied in with this high school here, the survival school here next door, basically. And so, yeah, for my looking back at things, little bit of the background for myself very quickly is my grandmother on my mother's side went to residential school. Not everyone from the community went, because a majority of people, my understanding, went to the schools here, the day schools here. But she was one of the people that, for whatever reasons, was sent to, and her brothers and sisters. So there was a whole aspect that many community members were sent, many of them from this community. Those who were Catholic went to a place called Spanish, which was in the area past Sudbury, in the area of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. So they were there, and you know, so that's a factor in, and that's an aspect of an effect on the community members again. So that part, and when I grew up, I wasn't aware of this, but only later, when I found out more, I recognized certain results, certain things that had happened, the language from my mother's side of the family, where why wasn't she speaking when my father could, and why weren't they speaking to it? So it's very complicated, the issue, and many people have experienced that. But my personal experience in the schools within the community, but going back a little bit, one has to, in order to do the whole story about education though, but when education, formal education began to come to the community, my understanding was the original people who were teaching were the people who wanted their children in the late 1800s were to have formal education. Some people would send their children out, but there were people who taught. They were speakers in the 1800s. There were some gentlemen that were teachers, and they were having, according to the information I've been told, they were having success with the students who were coming, attendance-wise, for example, because it was also in the language, but they were teaching in mathematics, the basic English. It was, you know, at the time, it was 130, 140 years ago. So that was going well, according to some of the records, that was going well. And in the early 1900s, somewhere around 1910 in that area, I forget the exact date, the government of Canada, and I look at it as part of their policy to take the Indian out of the child, let's just say. That was clearly written down as policy.
It's more disgraceful than that as an expression, but
yeah,
totally understand.
Out of the, you know, I understand that. And so they, since the government of Canada decided to basically subcontract Order of Nuns, the Sisters of St. Anne, to come into the community and to provide education. Got rid of those teachers who were there, who were speakers from the community, these 2 or 3 men, and basically said, no, you're no longer needed, and brought in this Order of Nuns. Many of them were English speaking. And so earlier I was listening to a couple of people talking about so your guests, one of them talking about, and talking about why we speak English.
That's right.
Here. And part of the answer, they were talking, and that's true what they said, absolutely true, that the connection with the United States, the ironwork, people had gone for work and they were bringing, and like, but even at the same time, the education that was brought here, Sisters of St. Anne who were brought in, were primarily from Massachusetts.
So they're Anglophone.
Anglophone. They came in, and the schools, they said, the school, the main school, that were all English Anglophone teachers. Wow. They came in. And so anyone who sent their children to school, it was, at that time, 120 years ago, they were, or 110 years ago, they were all speaking Kanien'keháka for the most part. Many of them had no knowledge of English even, depending on where they lived, depending on their backgrounds and stuff, you know. And they ended up, English was the language. And that was really, in my opinion, the key. The English in the schools then became, it pivoted. And so the community went along, and then you add many of the families going to the United States and so on. So there was no French, Francophone or French language education in the community. That was not necessarily the choice of the community. So that developed, and that's to me, the big, so that continues. But again, you got to understand that while this education was being presented by the Sisters of St. Anne in their style and their beliefs and so on, in these day schools, again, what ended up happening was, it changes a lot of it impacts the children and the young people in many, many different ways. So I go, in 1959, I start school in Cattery School, which today is one of the schools. It's the English stream or English language stream elementary school in Kanien'keháka. And I can just summarize it by saying in the 7 years I was at Cattery School, coming from in the middle of my community, not one time did I remember hearing a word of my language.
Not 7 years.
In 7 years, from 1 to 7. Not one time did I hear a story. Not one time did I hear a song. Not one time did I see a picture on the wall of anything representing the culture.
Literally take you out of your culture and impose the dominant culture.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. That's what was going on. The only thing I remember, I tell this story a bit to people when talking, and other times I've told this number. The only thing I remember about the culture, our people, was they opened up a book, a spelling book they used to give us. I think it was about grade 3. And they'd open it up, and they'd have a little short story of 3 or 4 paragraphs, and they'd have word exercises, new words, and so on in this little speller. Some people my age might remember seeing those things. So it gives you an idea how, they'd know, I know roughly how old he is. So I read this, and the only thing in all of, they had variety of stories, was the story about how the savage Iroquois, the evil or whatever you call it, they killed the Jesuit priests, Father Jogues,
that too.
Yeah, and the Hurons and the whole, and we burned them at the stake or made them run the gauntlet and basically became martyrs.
Off.
But there was a story, and I'm in grade 3 or around grade 3. It was that time that people, I think there are people who still have that book, and I've heard of one person, but try to imagine that for a second in my own community.
Yeah, it's about your own people they're talking about.
Yeah, and it didn't register that much. It was just okay, but you think about
other people.
Yeah, it must have been. And that tells you a little bit about how there was a distance in terms of reality and what you're being told, it's very complex. And so many of us, my age and younger, experienced that going to school, experienced many other things. Many of them not very positive. I'm being nice here.
Yeah.
And so that was going on. And then in the 60s or so, there were various events after the St. Lawrence Seaway. I think a lot of the community began to examine things that were happening and had happened to us. And then...
Sorry, I just wanted to know, did the scoop in the 60s and 50s actually manage to get to Kanien'kehá, or did you guys?
I think my understanding is it did to an extent, maybe not as much as into some other more isolated community. I think that's a big fact. We got to keep that in mind. And part of the reason why many of our people the majority didn't go to residential schools, go back, is that that we were close to a big city, so the access to other teachers and facilities and whatever was there. Plus, they couldn't, there were schools here. The size of the community, which was larger than most indigenous communities, they couldn't make the excuse that we can't afford it, we can't build a school. A lot of places that, my understanding, that was a common, it's too expensive, so we got to have a central place and everybody within 200 miles goes there, or whatever. But for us, it was harder to make that. But the young people that they would send to the residential schools often came in situations that maybe there would have been a woman had been widowed and was having a hard time. And the government representatives would often target, grab them, and say, "You're going," and convince them that they're better off. They'll get a good education. I mean, I could talk about, like I said, the stories I heard from my grandmother and my mother telling me about my grandmother's experience, but there were other people that can tell stories.
A lot of people think that this is in the history books, but people still alive today are directly impacted, and probably for another 3 to 4 generations.
100%.
Because we all, I mean, even if people are not aware, our listeners, there is such a thing as a 7-generation impact.
100%.
There's the responsibility of doing things for the next 7 generations, but no matter what you do genetically and psychologically, there is, and it's recognized that you can have an effect for at least 7 generations when trauma is involved.
Yeah,
So.
There's a great deal of trauma all over. And even with the trauma that occurred in the schools within the community, but going in the residential schools, it was they've been documented. It was quite not for me to continue telling that stories, but I've heard them and I've had some experience close to me, and which has had an impact in many ways.
Getting involved in education must have been something really important for you, so that you can say it's not going to happen to the future kids. Not
right away, because. Not as a teenager. I mean, I was just going through, and then early years, I didn't know what I was doing. Like a lot of us, we were just trying to keep our head above water sometimes, But essentially then what happened, now I move away a little bit from my experience, but I think by telling you about what I experienced, that was common for all of us, people at my age, we weren't getting anything. But I can verify, we had nothing. We were sent to the school, and pretty soon that some of them would speak, they would be punished. That happened.
Speaking
the language, and for sure. And it eventually began to, the way I looked at it, families began to resist, but then after a while, what can we do? They began to, when they tell you enough times that your language is backwards, you're not going to use it, it's old, you're old-fashioned, and they tell you enough times, and you're hearing that in school now, and the parents are, I think after a while, it begins to seep right in there, and there's all the resulting effects. So in the 70s, now times are going along, and certain incidents happen. I went to the first year when the Kanien'kehá students went to Billings in 1968. And we went to Billings, and I did grade 10. I did 2 years, 10 and 11. And trying to fit in with all of us, one of the things I remember was it was a huge school, over 3,000 students when we went there. And we were just all trying to survive in our own way, kind of like, but we would go and there would be like 30 homerooms. And I remember that they would say there was 35 or 40 of us in that grade or whatever. We'd all be in different homerooms. If you look at the early,
split you up.
It split us up. That's one thing. But as there were different, I'm not going to go through all the events, but in the 70s, a couple of incidents happened afterwards. In Howard S. Billings High School, there was a student walkout by our students as a result of a little fight and things that happened. The students in 1971, I wasn't there, but that was the year after, they had a walkout because of an incident that happened, and they didn't want to go to classes. And they sent people from the community, and they met with the students, and they asked them, what do you want? What is it that we can do to help you? We're not going to school. And basically talking to the people who were there, basically saying, there's nothing here that these are the young people, the 16, 17-year-olds, saying, we want our own, we want language class. We can't speak our language, very few of us. We want our own counselor. We want like that we can feel comfortable. We want our courses on the culture were ours. And they asked for a few things. And one of the things they asked for was we want our own high school. They just threw it in there. So there were efforts made not long after to do most of those things. But the high school thing was set aside because that was a bigger project than getting a teacher to come in and teach a language to once or twice a week. So they did make some accommodations. So that continued. And at the same time, within the community, people were waking up a little bit and looking around and saying, you know what, our elders who can speak the language, a lot of the younger people are not learning the language and they're not learning the culture. So they began to say, you know, what can we do? And so one of the things they did was we need to take control of our own education. Because at that time, the community really basically had no control. It was all, the government of Canada set the rules, said follow this curriculum, provincial curriculum and whatnot, and they hired who they wanted.
That's right.
So the community had like no say at all. So over a number of years, they strengthened the community. They got together and they began to say, we want control. And there was, they fought for that in the early 70s, late 60s it started, but early 70s. And then these young people, high school students were demanding certain things and were noticing things. And you got to put it in the times that was going on. Exactly. There was a lot of going on in the bigger societies. Yeah, there was protests. No, but even before.
The AIM.
There was AIM, and even in the United States, all the anti-war Vietnam and protests were becoming a big,
There's a lot of progressive ideas.
Yeah, and that we can do something. Yeah. We need to step that year of being passive, or that time of being passive, was at least being pushed aside. And so a long story short, brought us to 1978, and it was the community been talking about a high school. Now they're putting language programs in the elementary school. Now they took over education in the elementary schools. Now they said we're going to be giving culture class, we're going to be giving language, they're going to be getting classes. And that was building now in the community, in the elementary portion. But now the high school, majority of students were going to Howard S. Billings from Kanien'keháka. A few were scattered in other schools. And then Bill 101 comes in. There's a whole story behind that. There becomes a walkout from Howard S. Billings. Had really nothing to do with the way I call it. With some people, it wasn't about language. And it wasn't about, so much cultural. But it was more of a, hey, wait a minute. We're being told that we have to do this. And we have to prove that we have the right to go to school. The issue was that. The issue was not about the language. The issue was about sovereign rights and making that your choice. And hey, we shouldn't be asking and going around and saying, can we do this? Can we do that?
You have to be consulted before anything, but now they're deciding things and imposing them.
So basically they went to the school And they knew that they were going to likely not. And they said, will you let our students in without these certificates, without having to, and the school couldn't because they're funding from the province and so on. And it was expected almost. And they said, okay, we're walking out. And that was the day of when they walked out of Cowardice Buildings and set up the survival school virtually in a week. Wow. In a week.
That's it.
And 100% with nothing. No buildings, no money, no teachers, no books, no desks, nothing.
That's resistance.
Yeah, and they took exactly the resistance, and it was like, okay, we walk back. What are we going to do if they say no? And basically said, we'll have a school for you in about a week. Just be patient. We're going to do it. And it happened. Now, it wasn't perfect, but there was a whole sense of pride.
Exactly.
And we're on this together. We're in this together, and we're doing it and that's why the name Survival School happened. So now the community controls all but students going out, obviously, to CEGEP and universities. But basically then a community now says, well, and that's where the entire Kanien'keháka education system developed with the education center, which is essentially like the education system. The school committees are like the equivalent of the school boards outside. And we make the decisions about our education. And that has had a huge effect on why we have this building, why we have the building like the cultural, because the resurgence of the language programs, the realization that, yeah, those kids had said, we want the language. Well, looking around, some of the elders are passing on. We need to keep that language going by teaching more people. The young people, my age, most of us, we weren't going to get it. Okay, most of us weren't. That's just the way it was, and why, but we need to focus on the younger people and build these programs and make sure that the culture was at the top of this curriculum. And we're going to make the decisions on what is taught, what the general philosophy of it, what's really important, what our young people need to know to function in this world around and for their community, to benefit our community, our culture, our people. So that was what happened. So when you go to, again, there's some amazing things happening right now in education. They had a symposium last week at the high school, survival school. And of all the educators involved and all the staff involved in the whole system, and coming up with amazing examples of the things that, the great things that they're doing, and the plans that are in place, and the programs that they're in place. And it was really exciting, and that continues. And so what you got is you have a community that says, this is what we're teaching, and we're gonna prepare our students to be the best we can prepare them. And then when they go out there, they're going to be prepared. And there were challenges about getting students in CEGEP, in some of the training centers. There's no doubt they had to do a lot of fighting, negotiating, et cetera, to get the students. But our high school, as a survival school, does not follow the Quebec curriculum, does not give Quebec exams, the MELs, does not, totally independent. Gives it under its own auspices. The education system awards diplomas, certificates, and again teaches, puts the language in there, makes sure we're taught the history. What I taught was
not the ones that
I was not teaching
from outside.
I was not teaching the Quebec curriculum, which essentially, when you're talking about one level where history starts with Jacques Cartier lands.
That's right.
Okay, and that's exactly what we would say. Okay, this guy came along. Maybe we'll teach part of it, and we'll say what we saw,
Exactly.
what our experience was, what was important to us, and so that has really been in education, and it continues to evolve. It continues to evolve, and with nothing from what I heard, even at the symposium, is that we're not stopping there.
Yeah.
You got to keep pushing it and try to keep pushing it, but also in a very positive way, because it's for our young people, because times are changing.
That's right.
So we have to also recognize certain things. But how do we make sure that they're taught as Kanien'keháka, and as we say, the people of Kanien'kehá, so that's where they're coming from.
So it's like a resurgence movement that's been coming along across the history, and most recently really peaking, and it's going forward in a very incredible and fantastic way. This is a perfect example right here. And we're talking about sovereignty and all that, and nobody can talk about sovereignty without talking about defense. And we've had the chance in our visit of the community to talk about the implication of Indigenous people in the Canadian Armed Forces, and defending the sovereignty of Canada and the Crown. And they were like key to this. Even we speak, and they made movies in the United States about the code talkers using the
Navajo
language,
especially,
and how important. And the Indigenous people were always an ally in one way or another. And there's an incredible monument also inside of the community that is a testimony to the sacrifices of the people from Kanie'keháka to the numerous wars that we've been in.
The cenotaph is one thing that's right in the village area, very, very close, and oftentimes it's part of something that, again, me being a tour guide, we'll talk about and touch on that, depending on the interests of the people that are there. And it's the history of that. When you really go look at things, that's a part of it probably is not the thing that is the thing that jumps out the most people about defending, but the idea is just defending freedoms, defending our right that you talked about, that's the sovereignty. And throughout history, and then I could go into a whole deep dive about some of the history about our people, the Haudenosaunee people, the Five Nations people, all the challenges our people faced in the time, especially when the settlers came along and all of that, the challenges that we faced in trying to maintain our sovereignty and trying to hold on to as much of the land as we could. And sometimes it was successful, other times it was not, but there was always that effort to show that this was our land, and it's all about the land.
Yeah.
It's all about the land.
That's what Gerald said in his book.
And I think I've seen personally some examples of when the issue is about land, and so the people step up. You can talk about other things, and you'll get different people, saying, "Well, I don't agree." What we never can all agree on everything, 100%. But when it comes to that, when it's about, and that goes a lot to, I'm going to get back to the whole thing, but it goes a lot to the, we talked about the Seaway in the past, and about how many times we had no say in all the different things the Seaway goes and all. And after all that went in, now you get this, you had 1990 happen and all. It's a land issue. It was about people saying, you see that one sign somewhere, not one more inch. Not one more inch. And that is really because we didn't say that we want this. We didn't say we want these things going through, but it was just put right through. And then when the Seaway came, that's my opinion on what happened is people, that's where that whole attitude was, no more.
That's it.
But at the same time, when you say about going back to the tradition, anybody, as you said, wants to defend their territory, their way of life, their culture, their beliefs, the things that they're really important, and their families, and the future of their children. And so as time went on, we've always been involved. You go back to the wars of especially around the 1812, and it was really, there were other times.
That's right.
1812, you look at, depending on a situation, and again, joining in and saying, okay, we have to defend because we see a threat on our way of life. If this happens, we're not sure what we necessarily, that's how I look at it, is those guys are coming from the south, and then, maybe we're not always 100% getting along with the people up here, but we're going to defend it because we don't know what they're going to do if they come up here to us. So we better make sure that we're sending a message. So that happened, War of 1812. There was a tradition. There was always a tradition of, part of it too has to do with adventure.
Yeah.
To a certain degree. Let's not, So that
we're all human.
Yeah. So there's like young men, or like I'll go the challenge of doing that, and that continued on, and so 1812, and then other events happened, and then you get to the First World War, the tradition of a fair amount, and if you go, a fair amount of people from the community, men in the First World War, enlisting and serving and. And seeing the similar, that there's a threat to the way of life that we have here. We don't know how, but we're willing, and tie it in with a sense of adventure and all of that. So, but there's been a tradition of that in not only this community, but indigenous communities. There's been some amazing examples of, there's, I guess, some things I've read where the percentage of people who enlisted and it was from indigenous communities was higher than the outside the outside part. I think that's accurate. I think you could check that out. Was higher than the average on the outside, say Canada.
I think it goes along the lines of the Turo Wampum, where you respect one another, and then you say, well, it doesn't go always the same. It doesn't always go well, but. We can still respect the Turo Wampum and get along, and then you're an ally. So I think it's important to mention the fact that throughout history there was this fundamental aspect is that we were allies.
I think you make a good point that and exactly going back to the 1700s, especially in that part of the time, and then later everything I've read and everything I've been told is that, we were in there. We looked at it as we were allies. We had our own reasons to a certain degree, but also we saw, as I said, we were going to assist, ally, be involved in that. And
even though the Crown and Canada didn't always respect their side of the Turo Wampum.
Yeah, in the 18th...
I say we because I feel so attached, but the Kanien'keháka maintained their side of the bargain, but it wasn't always respected on the other side. Yeah. But you still maintain your allyship.
And the Turo Wampum, the way I've been told, is it's all about, that doesn't mean we can't go in there and say, hey, we like that, we'll try that. Right. It's about telling each other what you need. Exactly. It's about not telling. That's what that says. It's about you telling us what, or you interfering in ours, or vice versa. And so I think that's a really philosophical, you have to get that down clear. But in the history of we have many men enlisted, not just in this community. Many men have continued, because I guess a part of it was the tradition of defending and being there. And so, and in the Second World War, Korea, Vietnam, of course, you may or not know how many men from this community enlisted there were like 50, I don't know the exact number, but in that range enlisted for Vietnam. And part of it, the connection with the United States that we talked about in ironwork. Yeah. That's a big part of it. The times, the adventure, there's so many, there's a lot of factors. You can't just say it was because of this or because of that. But that was a big part of that. We're going to be there because at the time they thought that this was a just reason, but also adventure. And so, but again, that whole thing about allies and being there's the stories I had is whenever they were having was, I remember early stories about the draft, and I don't know how accurate it was. I've never really done a dive on it. But when they were drafting in Canada, there were cases, they said, of some police or whatever coming onto the community and trying to grab guys and find guys who I guess name had come up in some because they were drafted And then they were looking for them, and there the people weren't happy about that.
I could imagine.
No, I mean, in other areas, in Quebec, there was also a real, resistance for whatever reasons. But I know in this community, it would be like, you're not going to tell us and force us, and we'll do it if we want to.
Exactly.
And then I think that carries over, it continues. But so then, I don't know the exact history of everything. So with so many people serving, there were some men, I think it was in the late 60s, it could be in the mid 60s, might have been even sooner, decided that they would start a Legion branch in Kanien'keháka. And so they got some funding and so on and built the Legion branch, and and that's continued since then. Mm-hmm. And in the community, you look when you go to the Legion, there's they have different ceremonies that go on. They host events too. They have hallways. The events of most legions, and then they have I think it's a big. It's not a cannon. I forget my friend's name.
Yeah.
It's not a tank. It's not a tank. It's a howitzer. I think they call it.
It's a cannon on.
Yeah, but it's a big gun, and I don't know the terms.
We'll show it.
I guess you can show it, but that was I don't know all the details of how the gentleman from the Legion would know, but that's an eye catcher. Yeah. When people come by and they look at that, and then you catch that, and but then of course there's a big. They hold annually the November 11th, the Remembrance Day ceremonies are held, and I think it's in the area. It's one of the more popular ceremonies that happen in the area. It's pretty well done, I think, and they have outside groups and other legions also sometimes coming in, and they're hosting them for the remembrances.
That's right.
At the cenotaph that's there.
Well, that covers a lot of stuff today. I thank you very much. We could talk for more hours, I'm pretty sure, but the show's coming to an end. I just want to thank you very, very much, Kanien'keháka, for participating. I think it's very valuable that you share what you know with us and the audience, because it's important that we have this communication. We're neighbors, and you're the host of this territory, so we're glad to be here and very happy to be able to enjoy this and learn all about this.
I'm glad I had the opportunity to maybe hopefully, share some of my the little things I've learned and to maybe bring some enlightenment.
You bet. Greatly appreciated. Yeah. I'm going to switch over to French now to close this. Donc, voilà ce qui met fin à cet épisode qui est comme trois parties. En fait, on a fait 3 heures sur le tourisme, mais le tourisme, comme vous avez vu, ça l'a débordé sur des histoires, la culture, des nouvelles constructions, des événements. Donc, c'est toujours très intéressant d'apprendre à connaître nos voisins, les Kanien'keháka de Kanien'kehá. Puis, écoutez, restez avec nous pour la conclusion de cette série où j'aurai la chance de pouvoir faire le tour de tout ce qu'on a appris ensemble, faire la conclusion, résumer ces choses-là, vous donner d'autres indications peut-être. Puis, je suis très heureux d'avoir partagé jusqu'à présent cette marche ensemble vers la réconciliation. Donc, soyez avec nous à la prochaine.